you do have a divine purpose. You are put here by a divine creator, and there is a purpose for being here, an evolutionary purpose where you're here to grow and develop and help others and help yourself, and that outer reality is always in flux, outer personality and outer relationships are in flux, but the real you, the essential you that came in as a baby, is always the same. And because it's immutable, the more I can line my life up with that immutable self, the more I'll have a sense of hope, because I'm with my true purpose. Today I want to talk about how to overcome hopelessness. So I know a lot of us have a lot of challenges in life, and we have difficulty with coping with the many challenges of life. And there is this old saying that hope is the mother of humanity, that humanity can only exist because of hope. Hope is the thing that keeps you together. And a lot of people are becoming increasingly hopeless in the sense that they are struggling to find meaning in life. And we live in complex times. And also, because of media, it creates added complexity in the sense that, a couple of 100 years ago, the town or village 20 miles or 30 kilometers from where you were living, they're going to be having a little war. And hundreds of people, and a small community of a few thousand people, say 2 villages, maybe 1,000 people, 2,000 people, and 100 people die. And you didn't ever hear about it. But today, we have blasted through our phones and computers endless information about every war, everything that's happening in the world, and it's frightening. So what I'm trying to say is that the world was always intimidating, but we can see it today. And we have a lot of challenges with obviously the environment, and our modern lifestyle is stressful. So how can we be more hopeful? How can we keep ourselves together when that old saying, the Billy Ocean song, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. So I'm just going to show 2 diagrams today. One which is a famous one from Stephen Covey. These are just 2 things to think about to help with the idea of coping and overcoming hopelessness. So the Stephen Covey one, of course, is the circle of influence and the circle of concern. And then I have my own little one as well. And my own little one is maybe adjusting the idea of psychology and spirituality. It's a little bit different, a little bit nuanced. So let's just take a look. We'll make this a brief video. So let's just take a look at the Covey one first. Okay, so let's take a look here. Okay, so the Covey diagram, it's a lovely diagram that Stephen Covey came up with. And the principle is very simple, is that when we look at the circle of concern is all the things that concern us. And so we switch on the news, the Ukrainian war, the Israel-Palestine conflict, Israel kind of trying to provoke Iran, instability in the USA, climate, all that stuff. We had a couple of years with this virus and all that stuff going on. And there's a cost of living crisis in many Western countries and many countries around the world. The logistics got messed up, so a lot of things become more expensive. You might notice you want to buy a car, it costs a lot of money to buy a car anywhere in the world today. So we get concerned about these things, but we can also get concerned about silly things like, famous people, famous influencers or movie stars or music stars or whatever. And the problem here is that if I'm focusing so much on the circle of influence, and it becomes very big, if the circle of concern is very big, then my circle of influence is very small. Because if I'm worried about, say, the Ukrainian war, I can't do anything about the Ukrainian war. I can't do anything about what's happening in Gaza. I can't do anything that's happening with supply chains around the world or the various inequalities. But if I'm concerned about them, we see this with a lot of environmentalists. A lot of environmentalists suffer from terrible depression because they're worried about the world's going to end in 50 years. And that's a huge speculation. And the world is very unlikely going to end in 50 years. Climate problems and environmental problems are not that serious. But these people are convinced that they are. And so they're stressed out because of what they're convinced. So their circle of influence their circle of concern is huge, and their circle of influence is very small. Okay? Now, what Covey is saying is basically that put all these things, you could take like a piece of paper, you can print this out, or a blank one of these, and put all the things that you're concerned about, and write them down, and then try and ignore them, because you can't do anything about poverty in some other country or some humanitarian crisis other than you can send a few dollars over, okay? So instead you focus on the circle of influence. That's what I can do today, who I can affect today. So for example, you watch some advertisement on YouTube, for example, about people being impoverished and some humanitarian crisis. Well, send some money over. So rather than feeling bad, send some money over, or go and do some volunteering. Okay, focus on the things that you can change. Focus on the things that you can do to help. And as we see in this diagram here, what we're saying is, the less you focus on things that you're concerned about, and the more you're focused on things that you can influence, well, the benefit of that is that your circle of influence gets bigger, which means that after a while, so say you do some kind of charitable activities or environmental activities, whatever, after a while other people also get in on the act, and you end up influencing other people to do some good, and you end up being more and more effective. And this is actually goes back to Stephen Covey's the guy who came up with the 7 habits of highly effective people, which would later become the 8 habits. And this is really relating to the habit of proactivity. So the problem with procrastination is that people are focused on their concerns but not their influence. The cure for procrastination, I know there's a lot of expensive courses on the internet about curing procrastination, but the actual cure for procrastination is simply getting off your ass and acting. And if you're not sure what to do, at least do something. So the actual act of doing things creates a response. It creates an empowerment. So the more that you can influence the world around you, the better you'll feel. And this comes into a second thing which we can look at, which is the idea of victim consciousness. So in victim consciousness, the tendency is I am a victim and I can't influence anything. So my circle of concern is huge, my circle of influence is tiny, and now I'm a victim. So everybody is affecting me. I have no empowerment at all. So when we expand our circle of influence and we reduce our circle of concern, our victimhood reduces, because the whole victimhood is like, I am the way I am because I was born into the wrong community, I was born in the wrong country, I was born to the wrong parents, I went to the wrong school, I got the wrong job, I got out the wrong side of the bed. It's all somebody else's fault. Now that sounds fine, blaming other people, but the problem with doing that is it disempowers, because my joy, my happiness, and my ability to have hope is now down to other people around me. And the reality is, if you put off your power as a person and give it to other people, they usually won't serve it so well. Like many of us have had this experience whereby a friend would maybe arrange a blind date or would suggest somebody for a date or something, and you see them and say, how did this friend even suggest that we should get together? We're very different people, etc. So even people who care about you, they're probably not as good at taking care of you than you're good at taking care of yourself. That's where you really have to empower yourself and find out what you want to do and what makes you happy in life. Now, the other diagram I want to take a quick look at here is one I just made of myself. And it's, in this channel we talk a lot about psychology, and it's the theory that I basically advocate, okay? And all of these are psychology theories. We can't prove that they're true or they're false or they're this or that. They're just theories, because nobody can go inside your mind and see anything. But here's the deal, as far as I can tell. What we have in the diagram, this is outer versus inner, or we could say this outer versus inner self. Outer reality. Outer reality is mutable. It's always changing. And because change is the only constant in this world. And then we have the outer personality. So you watching this now is the outer personality. Me presenting this video now is my outer personality. Our outer personality is always changing. We're a small kid, we become a bigger kid, become a young person, an older person, etc. We go through different stages, we have different experiences. Our mood will change at different points in the day. So the outer personality is also mutable and changing. But then deep inside you, and again, this is a theory, everybody doesn't buy into this theory, but I buy into this theory, is the real you. And I often talk on this channel about how we are developed in the first few years of our life. In many ways, we're a clean slate. By about 7 or 8 years, we're programmed, and then it's hard to change. Okay? So our essential programming is there at 7 or 8, and that's why the Jesuits used to have this idea of give me the child of 6 or 7, I think it was, and I will give you the man, because they won't really change that much. And definitely you'll see by the time somebody is 16 or 17, that personality is basically the same for life. So the major thrust of your personality is by about 8 years of age, and it will develop a bit more, it becomes a bigger version by 16 or 17. And the person that you are at 16 or 17, you're basically, you're 95% of what you were at, say, 8, but you're 99% of what you were at 16. And the only thing that will differ is you might become a bit more extroverted, you might become a bit more introverted, you might have more wisdom, you'll have more life experience, so you can flesh things out a bit, and depending upon how your life goes, you'll become a bigger and better version of yourself, or a more shrunken version of yourself. And many of us will go through stages in life whereby we become a bigger and better version, and then we go backwards, then we go forwards, and we go backwards. So a lot of people, for example, at 16 or 17, we're very nervous and shy. By late teens, early 20s, they're far more confident. Often then maybe in their 30s or 40s, they become less confident as a midlife crisis. Later on, they become more empowered because they get over their midlife crisis and so on. And then at 70 odd or 80 odd, they become maybe very weak and sick. And again, they lose their power and go kind of backwards. And we see that a lot of elderly people at the last stages, last 6 months or year or two of life, their personality become much more introverted because everything's shutting down, their body's affecting their consciousness. So we go through these stages in life, but I would, although I buy into this, I would also advocate that there is an essential self. So it's kind of a paradox. We always said this thing is, are we a clean slate, or do we have something? And I think both are true. On one level, you're a clean slate. You are very programmed from early in life. But on the other side, there's also an essential you that was there even when you were a baby. And ultimately, all this other stuff, in some way it's rubbish in the sense that it can be useful, this outer programming, and we have to be programmed to fit into society, but most of it's not you. So you have a real you, an ideal you, which is ideal for you, and this comes from, say, my spiritual concepts of that we're created by a God, that there is a divine purpose in your birth, you're born for a reason, and you have a mission in life to fulfill. And that's my personal belief. Other people would have different ideas, but this is my personal belief. And so what we really have to do is get back to the real self. And this is also, when we look at soft skills and leadership development and growth as an individual, there's two ways. You can either go the fake it till you make it way, or you can go to the find yourself way. Fake it till you make it is useful in the sense as a tool. Your first day in a job, it's good to fake it a bit because you have to push yourself out there. First time on a bicycle, you're basically faking it. You'll probably fall off the bicycle, but unless you hop on the bicycle, you can't go out. You'll never be able to stay on it anyway. But in general, when I look at success, I think to fake it till you make it with no inner life means you don't have a foundation, and you're just like a carbon copy of who you think you should be. Whereas finding the real you is the real you. It's more concrete over time. So my advice to you is, first of all, we get back to this thing of the circle of concern, circle of influence. So don't be so focused on things that you can change. Focus on things you can change. That will make you a lot happier and give you more hope. The other thing to realize is that the outer world is always changeable, and even your personality is changeable. But who you really are is not. And another concept we can add in here is the idea of congruence. That it's a mathematical concept of two things that are very similar. the way I'm using it mainly here is the idea of two lines being parallel to each other. So if I have an essential self, a real self, that is immutable from birth to death, anything that lines up with that real self will give me an inner strength and an inner happiness. And so a lot of what we do is we try and be somebody we're not. And we concern ourselves with things we shouldn't concern ourselves. So the Stephen Covey stuff is not to concern ourselves with things that we shouldn't be concerned about. But the real you as a concept is that the more you find out who you are and become your real person, you will have more hopefulness because you have faith in the idea that you're here for a purpose. You're not just passing through. You're not just a piece of matter that just happens to exist, some bipedal animal just roaming the plains. You actually have a purpose in life. And that when you unravel it or find it, you'll find out that the more you become close to this, and there's sometimes you're going to be closer and sometimes you're going to be further, but the closer you can get to this kernel or nexus of who you are, the more inner strength you'll be. And so whenever you see through history famous people, like people standing up against all sorts of stresses and so on, and overcoming, it's because they found something that was their real you, and the real you is like very strong because it's really who you are. The only reason you really lack confidence is because you're trying to be somebody you're not. When you find out who you are and try to be who you are, you gain more and more confidence, okay? So that's two concepts I just want to share today. I don't want to go endlessly into it. Reduce your circle of concern, increase your circle of influence, be proactive. That's the first thing to help cope with hopelessness and have more hope. And the second thing is to realize is that you do have a divine purpose. You are put here by a divine creator, and there is a purpose for being here, an evolutionary purpose where you're here to grow and develop and help others and help yourself, and that outer reality is always in flux, outer personality and outer relationships are in flux, but the real you, the essential you that came in as a baby, is always the same. And because it's immutable, the more I can line my life up with that immutable self, the more I'll have a sense of hope because I'm with my true purpose. The major reason that people feel hopeless is they feel they either don't have a purpose or they're living a life that's not in alignment with their purpose. The more you find real you, you will find your purpose. And it's bit by bit, step by step, and sometimes forward, sometimes backwards. Now last question might ask, well, how do I find my real self? You find your real self through all the usual self-help stuff. Meditation, reading of books, talking to people, learning about yourself. Diary writing is very useful. Spending time with yourself, spending time with other people, looking at your values and how you live your life, evaluating yourself, and slowly but surely going on a journey of self-discovery. And so you don't find yourself in a day, you find yourself over decades. And even some people do have amazing experience. I think Eckhart Tolle had this thing, they sat in a park bench and suddenly he realized himself, okay? Great, but still, you'd have to do work after that to make sense of some inner change might have taken place, but to make sense of it, he would still have to spend years reading and thinking and making sense of it. But that's the big thing I would say. You do have a real you, an essential self, and the closer you come to actualizing that real you, the happier, more hopeful you'll be. The further you are away from that real self, the more likely you are to feel hopeless and lost. And these feelings are ways of pointing us in the right direction, okay? The shitty directions are good, I need to go in the right direction. If that doesn't feel right, I need to go in the opposite direction. Okay, so hope that helps you. Please, because I see a lot of people being stressed, and let's work together to try and find ways of being less stressed and more productive and happier in our lives, more fulfilled. So if you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.